SpongeBob is a character that I feel needs no introduction. He's probably one of the most recognizable characters of all time. I mean, he's yellow, square, and a sponge. I mean, really, it doesn't get any better than that. Slap him on a toaster. Yeah, in the 25 years SpongeBob has been around for, he's had his name plastered on just about everything known to man. Halloween costumes, thermometers, action figures, really anything goes when it comes to SpongeBob merchandise. Which of course means SpongeBob has also had his fair share of video games, some being pretty good, others being Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. But there's one SpongeBob game that is much different from the rest. A game so good that it stood the test of time and became known as, without a doubt, the greatest SpongeBob video game ever made. SpongeBob Employee of the Month. Just kidding, it's Battle for Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom was developed by Heavy Iron Studios and was released in October of 2003. When Battle for Bikini Bottom came out, it was a diamond in the rough of bad games based on cartoons. A lot of games based on cartoon properties were usually weird kart racers or some other type of game that didn't fit the property that was being adapted at all. Battle for Bikini Bottom, though, was able to take the first few seasons of SpongeBob and adapt them into video game form without it feeling forced or weird. Battle for Bikini Bottom played a big part in my childhood, as not only did I grow up with the GameCube version, but I also grew up with the PC version. And if you're wondering what that was like, these are two completely different games. Despite the PC and GameCube versions being completely different, I still enjoyed both, so because of how much I liked Battle for Bikini Bottom growing up, I felt it was only right to make an entire video talking about what made this game so special. And I'm not talking about the PC version in this video. As usual, before I get into talking about the gameplay, I want to talk about the plot because this game is one of the deepest and most intriguing stories out of any other game I've ever played. This game begins with Plankton working on creating an army of robots with his new invention, you know what, I'm just gonna throw it up on screen. Unfortunately, everything goes wrong when Plankton flips the switch to do not obey mode, and the robots, you won't believe me when I tell you this, don't obey him. So, because Plankton has no control over the robots he created, they end up wreaking havoc all across Bikini Bottom. Anyways, cut to SpongeBob and Patrick just kinda doing their own thing when they get the idea of playing with giant robots instead of smaller ones. So Patrick uses his magic wishing show, and lo and behold, the next morning, giant robots are real. This then begins the battle to save Bikini Bottom. That title's starting to make a lot more sense now. Now I'm gonna be honest and say, I really like the story of Battle for Bikini Bottom. It really feels like it could be an episode of the show. The actual game starts with you being able to fully explore SpongeBob's pineapple, which is just really cool. I remember playing this game for the very first time as a kid and spending at least an hour just running around SpongeBob's pineapple, seeing all the little details and whatnot hidden all over the place. I swear it's not just because I didn't know how to leave the pineapple. Once you leave SpongeBob's house, you're able to talk to Squidward, Patrick, Bubble Buddy, and some guy who I think is supposed to be Mr. Krabs.
Cause you're gullible, I'm gonna help you out. And of course, make a small profit in return.
Yeah, apparently they couldn't get Clancy Brown to do the voice acting for this game, so they had Chris Redfield, of all people, voice him. That's one thing that really makes this game feel special, is being able to interact with all these characters from the show and seeing what all of them have to say. Besides Mermaid Man and Mr. Krabs, every character in this game retains their original voice actors from the show, which is a rarity for licensed games like this. As you play through the story, you'll get to explore different areas of Bikini Bottom, which is honestly pretty cool. Like I mentioned earlier, you can fully explore SpongeBob's pineapple, but you also get to explore places like Blue Lagoon, the Krusty Krab, Jellyfish Fields. Pretty much every location that was featured in the first few seasons of the show is fully playable in this game. This game feels like it was made to be more than just a regular old licensed game for kids. The amount of references and Easter eggs in this game is just insane, and it's one of the reasons why I love this game so much. Each level in this game is filled with puzzles, some of these puzzles being pretty good and some being downright tedious. The rolling ball puzzle in the Murmur is a true test in patience. This is where I feel the game really shows its age. This puzzle requires the use of the Bubble Bowl, which I'll talk more about later on when I get to the gameplay, but the Bubble Bowl is so unbelievably slow that it makes doing this puzzle with any kind of efficiency almost impossible. And if you mess up, you have to do it all over again. Alongside the regular levels, you also get to take on bosses, which are just giant robot versions of Patrick, Sandy, and Spongebob, which is really cool. There's also side bosses like King Jellyfish and Prawn. All these bosses utilize each character's abilities really well and are really fun to go up against. Overall, both the levels and the main story of Bikini Bottom are pretty damn good. The fact that Heavy Iron Studios not only managed to make an original story for this game, but also managed to make it as entertaining and fun as it was is incredible. The actual levels themselves are really great too. As I mentioned earlier in the video, they're all designed really well and a lot of them still look great visually. Now that I've established how good the story and levels are though, the real question is, how good is the gameplay? Going back to this game after not having played it in so many years was definitely a weird experience. I honestly had completely forgotten what the game had played like, but after replaying the game, I have to say, while I do think the gameplay is rough around the edges at times due to it being, you know, a 21-year-old video game, it does have some good bits to it. The core gameplay itself is fine, it's just a 3D platformer collectathon. Really, it's nothing too crazy. I think the best part about the gameplay though is being able to play as not only just SpongeBob, but Patrick and Sandy too. All three characters have their own unique abilities such as SpongeBob's bubble moves, Patrick's strength, and Sandy's ability to lasso enemies as well as glide and swing across large gaps. As cool as their abilities are though, they definitely aren't perfect. SpongeBob's bubble bowl is really hard to control at times, sometimes throwing objects as Patrick never goes as well as you would hope, and swinging with Sandy's lasso can be a huge pain in the ass sometimes. Other than that though, each character feels great to play as and they all feel really unique compared to one another. Now when it comes to things to collect in this game, because well, it is a collectathon after all, you collect everything. Shiny objects, paintings, Patrick socks. Really, the sky's the limit for objects to collect in this game. Out of all of those things though, the most important collectible is golden spatulas, which are used to progress through the game's story. In total, there's 100 golden spatulas to collect in the entire game, which is just insane. Overall, the gameplay isn't terrible. It has its issues, but honestly, I'm willing to let them slide because of the game's age. I'm not going to sit here and overly criticize a game that came out 21 years ago because, well, that'd simply be a waste of time. Overall, Battle for Bikini Bottom is what I would call an underrated classic. While it's not the greatest game of all time, I do think it deserves to be talked about more often. Now sure, the game has problems as I mentioned earlier, but they're not anything that I would say ruins the game. It's just certain parts of the gameplay haven't quite aged all that well. Thankfully, in 2020, we would see the release of Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which was a remake that fixed a lot of the flaws from the original and is, in my opinion, the definitive way to play Battle for Bikini Bottom nowadays. It even added the multiplayer mode, which got cut from the original game, which is pretty cool. So if you are going to play Battle for Bikini Bottom in 2024, I highly suggest playing Rehydrated over the original just for the sake of your sanity. I only really suggest playing the original if it's purely for nostalgia. Or you could play Employee of the Month instead. I'm not stopping you.